Sometimes some systems can get all the attention. Time to look at something that may have been overlooked. Maybe in this case, though, ignorance is bliss. Greetings! Retro Zoltan here. For your consideration today is the Powkiddy X16. Right away I was reminded of the slightly unbranded X12 game player. Not only is this name simply just an X with a number, but it sports a giant 7-inch screen, making me wonder how many more similarities I'm gonna find between the two. I had gotten this some time ago, but sent it back to the user before I really got to explore this further. When I saw one used going for real cheap, I jumped at the chance. Seeing the box in this condition reminds me that I didn't pay too much, but I'm sure this can happen when getting stuff overseas anyway. The Powkiddy 16, without even opening the box, looks like a monster. It's huge, and it looks about the size of a Nintendo Switch. I'm at least pleased to know this is definitely a Powkiddy product. A recent review I did on this strange pink gaming handheld led me down a rabbit hole where I found out some companies say they're Powkiddy when they're really not. So, Powkiddy, I'm officially saying I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so I scrutinized the box enough. Let's open this. Buying used is giving me some regrets. The Powkiddy X16 is a bit rare these days, and good luck finding one that's not pretending to be a true X16. If you find one, the limited inventory now brings this up to $60 new. Buying used is considerably better. Okay, so the inside is also a bit wonky, but everything for the most part seems to be here. The device itself, to me, feels a bit light. I can't explain it, and maybe it's just me, but I was expecting something this large to weigh more than my phone. Still, maybe that's a good thing? Holding this thing up for several hours, a lighter-than-not system is probably very much appreciated. Flipping this over, I see this little sticker that says 16 gig. I'm assuming that's just the internal memory, since you can buy it in two ways. Let's hope the games they slapped on here, the ones that we're kind of stuck with, are good ones. While I'm looking back there's the proud Powkiddy logo, which to be honest, I kind of like. I know Powkiddy gets a lot of crap, but they do make some good products sometimes. And I don't think they'll ever be Ambernick, but they certainly deserve some love. Also on the back is, well, a camera and a hexagon-shaped speaker area. Also, I see an empty SD slot that I'll mess with later. The feel of this plastic is not my favorite. It's like a light rubbery coating that it bothers my hands. It's also a bit of a fingerprint magnet, so I'm constantly trying to clean it off so you don't think I'm disgusting. Flipping it over, you can see what you're going to be dealing with pretty easily. It's not what I wanted to see. Immediately, there's no D-pad to be seen. It's just 4 separate buttons. I think it's strange that they're multicolored. It just points out even more that there's no D-pad available. I think it would look at least 10% better in this setup if they just chose one color. Oh well. The A, B, X, Y buttons on the other side are similar and labeled on the actual buttons, which I'm a fan of. Pushing them feels clunky, but they're not completely horrible. I know angles will be tough with no D-pad, but the buttons might end up being somewhat acceptable. The slider joysticks are interesting. Not my favorite sort of analog controls, but at least the option is there. And I'm guessing the right one is to replace button pushes? I'm not entirely sure. Some people have no issues with these, and if you're a big fan of the PSP, you might not even mind this sort of controller. I'll just go out there and say that they're not my favorite, even being a PSP fan. At least they're flush and won't catch on anything, but it's not like you're going to be throwing this into your pocket to play on the bus. It's just too big. The top of the unit sports some very hard to read buttons. From left to right, you have the power button, a back button, a TV out port, a micro USB charging port, a reset hole, and volume buttons. No headphone jack, which is pretty sad, but I'm not surprised, I guess. Just the TV out that looks like one. Now, sadly, my system being used didn't come with a TV out cable, but I have one kicking around that I'll try out later. Also, why is the reset hole a hole? I can understand recessing a button to prevent pressing it by accident, but no one's going to be pressing anything in the middle back here. Also, I didn't notice this at first, but there are also triggers, which are pretty basic. I don't really like them, but they're there at least. So let's turn on the system and see what we're getting ourselves into. Now, the first time I tried booting this up, all I got was a black screen with a blue power light. I actually had to find a wall tack and poke it in the reset hole just to get it to come back to life. So if you get one of these and that's happening to you, Powkiddy has you covered. Okay, so after you get to see the logo for a while, it dumps you into the main screen. Here you can find all sorts of menu options. It's really sluggish, but mostly because of the awful dripping sound. I absolutely hate menus that do this. I turn this off right away. If you have one of these, I recommend it because I swear it's much faster when you do so. Maybe it has to load up the sound repeatedly or something, but trust me, try it. Now, if you're like me, you're probably only interested in the games, but the X16 surprisingly can do a lot of stuff. You can play music, take photos and videos, even read an ebook if you're into that sort of thing. I even explored it further and found a dictionary, which is pretty entertaining. It almost works, kind of. So let's get to the games. The X16, using its internal memory, only plays Famicom, Game Boy Color, Sega Mega Drive, Neo Geo, and Super Famicom. These games work fine until Super Famicom, which is sluggish at best. But this is common for the older stuff. The other systems work fine, but sound quality lacks here, and they're all stretched out, so they look pretty awful. You can easily adjust this, though, in the settings, and I don't recommend actual size because, well, you see. In this case, I recommend scaling. And don't worry about doing it for each system, it's sort of just one emulator doing all this, so you only have to do it once. Games included are a decent lot, and from what I see here, there are no unnecessary repeats. Something I was surprised to see, honestly. No more 14,000 Famicom games. These are realistic numbers. And if there are repeats, it's not obvious. It just shows a little care, and I appreciate that from Powkiddy for sure. With the ability to connect an SD card, adding your own additional games is possible. And given what this thing can play, you won't need a horrible amount of space either. Still, I tried a 32 gig, the maximum this can handle, and it worked with no issues. Simply grab a micro SD card and format it to FAT32 and start making directories. In these directories, you need the proper extensions. GB for Game Boy, GBA for Game Boy Advance, GBC for Game Boy Color, BIN for Mega Drive, and so on. When you pop it into your X16, it will then let you cruise to the directories and you can play what you added. The cool thing is, using this method, you can add 3 new systems: Final Burn Alpha games, Game Boy Advance games, and PlayStation. For the most part, Final Burn Alpha games work fine, so if you're a Final Fight game fan like myself, you'll be pretty pleased. Game Boy Advance games surprisingly work as well, but the sound does get a bit laggy sometimes. PlayStation even works on the X16 too, which was a huge surprise. But please don't torture yourself, it's just depressing to play unless if you like severe frame skipping, something you can't set unfortunately. Now, in playing around with this thing, I did find something interesting. You can access the internal games by simply connecting via USB to your PC and maneuvering to the game section. So in a way, you'll never really need to add an SD card if you don't want to, unless if you want more than 16 gig, I guess. Something I'm guessing you won't really need. In this, at least, you can reorganize your games in any way that you'd like. I think it's a nice ability, honestly, as long as you're careful. After that, there really isn't much more to say here. Exiting out of games is as easy as a button push where you can save and load your game or restart. Pretty basic. For those that like things simple, you won't be too thrown off at what's available here. Connecting to the TV, an option that some people really enjoy, works here too, and I'm not horribly disappointed. Since the screen you already have is quite big though, what's the point really? But still, it works. And that's all I have to say about the Powkiddy X16. If you're new to this sort of thing and like the idea of a large screen, one comparable to a Nintendo Switch perhaps, this might be a worthy find. And if you can't find it, you can always pick up an X12 for probably even cheaper. Thanks for watching, thank you so much for your support, and as always, I'll see you next time. Bye.